Well, currently our bottle has just a very thin surface and has no thickness. So how could we add a thickness to this bottle? Well, for this, Blender offers an interactive modifier. It's called Solidify. And when you click it, and let's zoom in a little bit, there you can see that you can add an interactive thickness that grows to the inside or the outside. However, like in Alias with offsetting curves or surfaces, you always have to be careful about when you expand or when you shrink something, because there could always be the possibility that at one point geometry starts to intersect with each other, for example in this case. So you have to take this with a grain of salt and also plan in a little bit of manual hand adjustment. And very often the thickness tool in Blender as well as Alias can be used to get an approximate surface, and then you have to go in by hand and finish that. So what this means in our case, for example, you can see here that this surface, for example, intersects. So that is nothing that is really usable for me. So I would have to fix this by hand. And currently the modifier only creates an interactive surface. I can't really touch it. But with the thickness slider, I, for example, set my thickness, I'm good with it, and I'm not going to change this afterwards, or I don't need to, so I can click apply now. And when I click apply, and now I go into edit mode, you can see that there's actually now a tangible surface that I can touch. So let's go into the shaded mode, the wireframe mode, and I place my mouse carefully, and then I press Control and click on this ring, and you can see that is one of the rings that is inside my model. So with this selected, then I can press X and delete loop cut. And then here you see there's another loop cut. No, not this one. So you have to be careful that you don't select something that's wrong. So this one, X, delete loop cut. Okay. And those loop cuts, for example, can go as well. Those were all the loop cuts that initially I built to create, for example, this surface. So now I have, for example, my surface offset inside my bottle adjusted, because even in a manufacturing process you will not have an offset inside the bottle that, for example, captures that glass lid. And now we have to do the same in the bottom. There might be some issues as well. And there is a slight problem, as you can see. So this one maybe we can adjust a little bit by scaling. And for example, you might notice that some bottles have a heavier bottom part, so maybe to add some weight. So instead of removing geometry here, I'm actually going to select some of that geometry, and then maybe I scale it up a little bit, or move it up. So like this. And then, well, maybe let's select everything here, and then I just move this part up. Okay, so you saw that very often I worked here with the wireframe mode, and then I tried carefully to analyze my polygon mesh, and by clicking on it try to make sure I was really working on the inside mesh. But there's also a way to hide, for example, the geometry. Let's say the outside shell I would like to hide. Well, I could, for example, click on a point and press H. Then it hides that point. and it hides all the elements that is connected to that point. So you see I select something and I press H and hide, and it's not that I'm deleting this point, it's just not visible. I could select maybe a ring and press H and hide. There you see I have the rest of my outer shell visible, and then the inner shell is visible. To unhide, you can press Alt H. So H is to hide and Alt H is to make visible. If you would like to make the complete outer shell invisible, you could, for example, click a button, keep your click a point, keep your mouse there, and then you press L. And L stands for select linked. That means I select everything that is connected or linked to that point or the geometry. And you see this way I selected the complete outer shell, and I can press H and then it's gone. This way, for example, it might be easier than to do some final adjustments to the mesh. So, and then if you would like it to be visible again, you see also in object mode you will see the geometry. If you go into edit mode, then it's gone. So it's actually a really nice feature. And then you can press Alt H and it's all back. The last thing we have to do is actually to close this gap up here. So there are two ways how we could do it. In a previous video I showed you that if you have, for example, two lines or two rings with the same amount of points, you can select them, then press spacebar and type in bridge, and then select bridge two edges, and then it will skin that surface in. Or in case you do not have like an even amount of points or loop cuts, you can select edge by edge and then always press F for fill or skin. So you see I basically skin a surface between each line. And maybe this lip is a little bit too round or too skinny, so I add one. No, actually not one. I would like to have two loop cuts up here, so it's a little bit more pronounced and stands out. Okay, so there's our very traditional looking liquid bottle.